Edric Malloran was once a ghost in the system, unseen, untouchable, and the mastermind behind Scotland's deadliest criminal empire. Commander Ilsa Merrow was the only one bold enough to hunt him, while disgraced detective Ronan Blaith swore to destroy what Edric built. Their paths collided in a secret war that exposed corruption, betrayal, and a syndicate so powerful it nearly brought the nation to its knees. This is the chilling rise and catastrophic fall of the Ironmoor Syndicate, Scotland's most dangerous gang. Just got wiped out. In the heart of Glasgow's darker quarters, a powerful gang began to form quietly in late 2014. This group would soon become known as the Ironmoor Syndicate, a name that would strike fear into both rival criminals and law enforcement alike. Unlike traditional street gangs, Ironmoor didn't start with turf wars or graffiti tagged territories. Instead, it grew from within the city's financial cracks, corrupt networks, and digital backdoors. It operated like a corporation, but with the ruthlessness of a war machine. The man behind it all was Drexen Vale, a figure so elusive that even his closest allies rarely met him in person. His orders came through encrypted channels, his whereabouts always shifting. Yet his control was absolute, and every move he made was cold, calculated, and terrifyingly effective. Ironmoor began by taking over small-time rackets, protection schemes, drug runs, and backroom gambling dens. But Drexen didn't want petty money. He had bigger ambitions. He brought in people who were specialists, not just thugs. Cale Strathmore was his first enforcer. A former MMA fighter turned underworld hitman, Cale was known for leaving no loose ends. Fear followed him wherever he went, and those who crossed him rarely lived to regret it. Cale's job was simple: remove threats, ensure silence, and send messages. His brutal efficiency made him one of Drexen's most trusted assets. Next came Alira Vint, a young woman who had once been a cybersecurity consultant for a private firm. After a scandal involving embezzlement and data theft, she vanished from the corporate world and emerged in Ironmoor's network as its digital backbone. Alira could breach encrypted databases, reroute police surveillance feeds, and transfer millions without leaving a trace. Through her, Ironmoor started targeting high-stakes digital crimes, manipulating online auctions, skimming financial transactions, and hijacking supply chains. Drexen then recruited Tovin Marek, a polished and quiet accountant who specialized in cleaning money. Tovin created layers of fake businesses, offshore accounts, and charity fronts that made tracing Ironmoor's profits nearly impossible. He turned drug money into real estate, arms deals into stock investments, and blackmail payoffs into art auctions. With his skills, Ironmoor built a facade of legitimacy, shielding its darker operations behind a curtain of financial normalcy. Completing the inner circle was Niall Ferox, a former arms dealer with contacts across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Niall had access to military-grade weapons, modified assault rifles, explosives, and even drones fitted for surveillance. Through him, Ironmoor's firepower grew far beyond what police forces were prepared to handle. Gang rivals were either bought out or eliminated. Street-level gangs either aligned with Ironmoor or disappeared, and those who tried to inform the police were found in alleys, their warnings silenced forever. Between 2015 and 2018, Ironmoor expanded its reach far beyond Glasgow. They took control of key transportation routes through Aberdeen, secured warehouse fronts in Dundee, and even established fake import companies operating out of the Edinburgh docks. Their influence grew so vast that customs agents, harbor authorities, and even airport security were unknowingly working under their control. Drugs, weapons, and stolen electronics passed through Scottish borders like everyday cargo. By the time authorities started noticing patterns in crimes and financial inconsistencies, Ironmoor had already buried its roots deep into the infrastructure. The group wasn't just running operations, they were controlling the environment that allowed those operations to thrive. Drexenvale was never seen on CCTV, never left a fingerprint, and his name never showed up in any official document. Yet every shipment, every bribe, and every silenced witness could be traced back to his influence. Rumors began to circulate within the criminal world about the Ironmoor Syndicate being untouchable. Some said they had deals with foreign intelligence. Others believed Drexen had once worked for MI6 and had turned rogue. But one thing was clear to everyone. Ironmoor wasn't just another gang. It was a shadow empire, growing larger and more dangerous with every silent move it made. In early 2019, the Ironmoor Syndicate was at the height of its power, but the beginning of its downfall came from an unexpected source. A journalist, Faye Lennox, an investigative reporter from Dundee, had built her career exposing corruption in quiet corners of the country. She was meticulous, persistent, and never afraid of chasing stories others thought too dangerous. When whispers of a powerful criminal network started surfacing around ports and financial institutions, Faye grew curious. She began digging into inconsistencies in shipping logs, strange property purchases, and unusually large donations made to obscure charities. What she uncovered was the faint outline of something vast, hidden in plain sight. A web of criminal activity so well structured that it looked legal from the outside. Faye didn't know it yet, but she was stepping into the world of the Ironmoor Syndicate. Her investigation led her to Tovin Merrick's network of shell companies, which disguised Ironmoor's illegal earning. Through online databases, offshore leaks, and whistleblowers, she started connecting the dots. She noticed that certain import-export businesses were reporting profits without conducting real trade. She found that construction companies were receiving massive investments but had no projects underway. Her instincts told her something big was buried under these fake transactions. She started tracking the financial trails, and they all pointed to Glasgow. What made Faye dangerous was her silence. She never alerted anyone outside her circle about the depth of her findings. She kept her files encrypted, her research private, but Ironmoor had eyes everywhere. Through hacked police databases and informants within various organizations, Alira Vint picked up on Faye's digital activity. Suspicious downloads, flagged searches, and inquiries into Ironmoor-linked companies reached Alira's attention. A quiet alert was sent to Drexenvale. Within days, the order was given. Faye vanished on February 14, 2019. She didn't return calls, missed deadlines, and failed to show up to meetings. Her flat was locked, her phone turned off, and her laptop had been wiped clean. Police opened a missing persons case, but treated it as low priority, citing the stressful nature of her job and suggesting she might have gone off the grid voluntarily. But a few people knew something was wrong. Most of all, Ronan Blaith, a retired detective who had helped Faye on past cases. She had trusted him, sharing her suspicions shortly before she disappeared. Ronan tried to involve the local authorities, but they showed little interest. He decided to investigate on his own. Retracing Faye's steps, he discovered her notes hidden in an encrypted folder she had shared days before vanishing. The contents were chilling. Maps, bank records, names of politicians, businessmen, and charity figures, all loosely connected by a common thread: the Ironmoor Syndicate. Ronan knew immediately that she hadn't just disappeared. She had been silenced. 6 months later, a hiker stumbled upon human remains buried in a peat bog near Inverness, confirmed it was Faye. The discovery was a shockwave across Scotland. The media, which had largely forgotten the case, erupted in outrage. Questions were raised in Parliament. Her murder couldn't be explained away anymore. This wasn't a random crime. This was a targeted execution. With pressure mounting, law enforcement had no choice but to respond. A special task force was assembled behind closed doors. They named it Operation Blackroot, after the idea of something dangerous growing unnoticed beneath the surface. Its goal was simple: dismantle the Ironmoor Syndicate from the inside out. Ronan was brought in as a consultant due to his knowledge of the case. He handed over every document, recording, and lead Faye had collected. It became clear that Ironmoor wasn't just a gang, it was an organized criminal enterprise with access to technology, money, weapons, and influence that rivaled even some governments. What no one outside the task force knew was that Ironmoor had already sensed the threat. Drexen Vale had a rule: eliminate problems before they grow. He didn't know who had the files, but he knew Faye had shared them. The countdown had begun, and the war between the shadows and the truth was about to begin. Operation Blackroot began with complete secrecy. Only a small group of trusted agents were brought into the fold. Leading the operation was Commander Ilsa Merrow, a woman known for dismantling criminal networks in South America. She had no ties to Scottish law enforcement and no loyalty to anyone within the political system. Her role was simple: find out how deep Ironmoor's roots went and tear them out, no matter how high up they reached. The first move was to find a way into the syndicate's inner operations. That's when investigators stumbled upon Callum Broder, a low-ranking courier who had been arrested 2 months earlier on unrelated charges. He was young, reckless, and scared. Exactly the kind of person Ilsa believed could be turned. At first, Callum refused to talk. But when presented with evidence that Ironmoor had marked him for death to prevent loose ends, he cracked. In exchange for protection and immunity, he gave Operation Blackroot something they desperately needed: an insider's map. Callum revealed the syndicate's warehouse locations, drop points, and the names of key operatives involved in day-to-day activities. He spoke of a location in Edinburgh, an abandoned church that was used as a front for meetings and drug storage. More importantly, he explained the hierarchy of trust within Ironmoor. Orders came from encrypted channels, meetings were mobile, money was moved in crypto, but even he had never seen Drexen Vale based on his information. The task force installed surveillance equipment near Ironmoor sites. Tiny drones equipped with cameras hovered around rooftops. Signal jammers were deployed to avoid counter-surveillance. They intercepted phone calls, tracked vehicles, and monitored shipments. What they discovered was astonishing. One warehouse in Dundee alone contained stolen artwork, illegal firearms, Class A drugs, and high-end counterfeit currency, all protected by advanced security systems and rotating guards. Ilsa realized that brute force wouldn't bring the syndicate down. They needed to dismantle it, piece by piece. First, they targeted Tovin Merrick's money laundering routes. Fake charities and overseas real estate firms were quietly shut down or frozen. Dozens of bank accounts disappeared overnight, creating a ripple effect in Ironmoor's finances. For the first time in years, the syndicate felt pressure. Then, a surveillance team followed a delivery truck leaving a suspected Ironmoor garage. The truck appeared empty, but its route ended at a hidden facility deep in the Highlands. Inside, agents discovered crates of unregistered weapons and cash packed in industrial drums. The evidence was overwhelming, but they didn't make any arrests. Not yet. Commander Merrow knew that a single misstep could warn Drexen Vale and send him into permanent hiding. However, the operation's success came at a cost. Just days after the Highlands discovery, a Blackroot safe house was bombed in the outskirts of Glasgow. 2 agents were killed instantly. The explosion was traced to a car parked across the street, rigged with military-grade explosives, the same kind Ironmoor was known to traffic. The bombing sent a clear message. Ironmoor knew they were being hunted. A storm of paranoia swept through the task force. Commander Merrow suspected a leak. Only a few people had knowledge of the safe house, yet the attack had been precise. A quiet internal audit began. Surveillance logs were reviewed, phone records were traced. That's when suspicion fell on Agent Declan. A decorated intelligence officer with full clearance to the operations database. His recent activity showed unusual logins at odd hours and encrypted files he wasn't authorized to access. Ilsa ordered a silent detainment. Declan was taken into custody during a staged meeting. Under interrogation in a black site facility, he confessed. For over 3 years, he had been feeding information to Ironmoor in exchange for money and promises of safety for his family. Through him, Drexenvale had known about raids, wiretaps, and investigations, always staying one step ahead. The leak explained every failed operation, every vanished lead, every death. Now, with Declan in custody, Operation Blackroot had its clean break. For the first time, they had the advantage, and with Drexen's safe house finally exposed, the countdown to Ironmoor's destruction had truly begun. The breakthrough came quietly, buried within a coded message intercepted by one of Operation Blackroot's cyber units. The message, sent through a secure dark web forum, contained a location, time, and a cryptic phrase: "Shipment leaves under the veil of St. Agnes." Alira Vint had used religious metaphors to communicate during past operations, and this clue pointed to an abandoned monastery just outside Inverare. Commander Ilsa Merrow approved the mission instantly, realizing this could be their only chance to corner one of Ironmoor's top operatives. At dawn, a Blackroot team launched a silent approach through the dense forest surrounding the monastery. Armed with night vision and signal disruptors, they breached the gates just as 2 vans were being loaded with weapons and cash. Among the men arrested was Niall Ferox, the Syndicate's arms supplier. He attempted to flee through an underground tunnel, but was captured before he reached the other side. It was a significant victory. Niall's capture meant the Syndicate had lost access to its weapons distribution pipeline. The interrogation of Niall was slow and grueling. He refused to speak for days, believing that Drexen would arrange his release or eliminate anyone who got too close. But Niall underestimated how much had changed since the last strike. With Declan Fern now exposed as the mole and out of the equation, the task force had regained control of its secrecy. They tightened security, limited information access, and cut off all known Ironmoor communications channels. After 5 days of silence, Niall cracked, not from fear of prison, but from realizing Ironmoor wouldn't come to save him. His confession revealed something far more dangerous than anticipated. Drexenvale had already prepared for a full collapse. He had contingency plans known only to a few: locations of vaults across Europe, lists of compromised officials, and a network of mercenaries waiting for activation. According to Niall, Ironmoor wasn't just going to vanish. It was going to implode, erasing its own existence while taking down anyone who got too close. Armed with this knowledge, Commander Merrow escalated the operation into a full-scale takedown. Simultaneous raids were launched across Scotland. Safe houses in Perth, stash sites in Falkirk, and business fronts in Aberdeen were stormed. Over 60 arrests were made in a single night, many of them mid-level operatives who had never seen Drexen but lived under his rules. Among the arrested was Cale, Strathmore, Drexen's feared enforcer, caught in a luxury apartment in Stirling, surrounded by surveillance monitors and high-grade explosives. Cale's capture shook the core of Ironmoor. He had been the shadow behind countless disappearances and retaliations. His silence was expected. But Cale did something no one predicted. He requested a meeting with Ronan Blaith. The former detective had become a symbol of resistance against the Syndicate, and Cale, facing the collapse of everything he once controlled, saw an opportunity to settle his own twisted conscience. In a high-secret interview room, Cale revealed the one thing no one else could: Drexenvale's real name, Edric Malloran. It was a name that had never appeared in any records tied to Ironmoor. Edric had once been an MI5 analyst, specializing in counter-terrorism finance. He had gone rogue after a classified internal scandal was buried by the agency. Using insider knowledge and surveillance methods he once used to stop terrorists, he created the Ironmoor Syndicate to prove a point that a man with enough intelligence, leverage, and disregard for human life could control an entire nation's underworld without ever being seen. Operation Blackroot had finally found its true target, but locating him would not be easy. Edric had erased all traces of his past, and if Niall was right, he had escape plans that could launch within hours. Commander Merrow, knowing how close they were, initiated the final phase, 0 hour, a no-hour/coordinated sweep to hunt down the last pieces of the syndicate and corner the man behind it all before he vanished for good. 0 hour began at 3:00 IMM with a kind of precision usually reserved for military invasions. Operation Blackroot agents fanned out across 7 cities simultaneously, striking known Ironmoor locations and suspected escape routes. Private airfields, shipping yards, and luxury bunkers in the Highlands were all targeted. The goal was simple: catch Edric Malloran, formerly known as Drexenvale, before he disappeared forever. Surveillance had picked up unusual activity at a decommissioned military base near Loch Etivie. Satellite imagery showed movements at odd hours, including a convoy of vehicles arriving under heavy fog. The base had been abandoned for years, making it a perfect hideout. A team of elite operatives was dispatched with orders to capture, not kill. They breached the base under complete radio silence, only to find it empty, cleared, and cold. No equipment, no bodies, just a single laptop left on a steel table. When activated, the screen showed a pre-recorded message. Edric's face appeared calm and deliberate as he explained the truth. He knew they were coming. He knew the operation had finally caught up to him, and he didn't plan on being caught. He spoke of corruption not just within Ironmoor, but beyond it, hinting at unnamed officials, global accounts, and a system that would continue without him. Then, with a soft smile, the screen went black. An hour later, a private jet registered under a fake corporation attempted to take off from a coastal airstrip in Northumberland. Blackroot agents intercepted it just seconds before liftoff. On board were several key Ironmoor figures and a briefcase full of unmarked passports, gold bars, and encrypted hard drives. But Edric wasn't among them. He had used the escape as a distraction. While the task force celebrated a near miss, Edric had already made his final move. It wasn't until 2 days later that his trail reappeared. A drone captured footage of a lone figure boarding a yacht in the waters of Ullapool. Facial recognition confirmed the identity: Edric Malloran. The yacht, named Oblivion, had no registration, no listed owner, and was shielded by advanced signal jammer. A storm was approaching fast, but Commander Ilsa Merrow made a call. Launch the intercept anyway. This was their only chance. A high-speed maritime team set off under harsh weather. Waves battered the boat, equipment short-circuited, and visibility dropped to near zero. Still, they pushed forward. As they neared Oblivion, they fired a grappling hook to secure boarding access. But by the time they got on deck, it was already too late. Inside the yacht's cabin, they found only one person: Edric, seated calmly with a drink in his hand. A revolver rested on the table beside him. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. But before they could cuff him, he triggered a hidden switch beneath the table. The boat was rigged with explosives. The agents managed to disable the primary charge just in time, but a secondary explosion detonated the engine room. The blast tore through the vessel, sending flames into the stormy night. Somehow, Edric survived. Burned and unconscious, he was pulled from the wreckage and flown to a military hospital under heavy guard. The man who once ruled Scotland's underworld from the shadows was now behind a glass wall, connected to machines, with no way out. In the weeks that followed, Ironmoor collapsed completely. Dozens of politicians and business figures were exposed, thanks to the files recovered from Edric's hard drives. Billions in assets were seized, entire networks dismantled, public trials were broadcast across the nation. People finally saw the depth of the syndicate's control and how close it had come to poisoning everything. Ronan Blaith stood outside the courtroom on the final day, watching the crowds demand justice. Commander Merrow was reassigned to a high-level intelligence role. Faye Lennox's name was posthumously honored in Parliament, and Edric Malloran, he would never speak another word. Doctors claimed the trauma from the explosion had damaged parts of his brain. Whether it was true or a final act of control, no one would ever know. But one thing was certain: Scotland's most dangerous gang had been wiped out, and the darkness they cast over the nation was finally beginning to lift.